Senator Canavan.
Thank you, Mr Deputy President. Well, before I come to the bill, I might just quickly respond to some of the misleading claims that was just made by Senator Grogan. Senator Grogan's been saying or suggesting that the current government, the Labor government, has reduced Australia's emissions. I just checked their own accounts, their own greenhouse gas accounts on the Department of Environment's website, on their government's website. Emissions have actually gone up. They've gone up under this government. And so I'm not exactly sure what Senator Grogan, through you, Chair, was claiming in the last contribution we heard. She claimed that they were taking action and reducing carbon emissions. Well, in fact, when they got to power at the end of 2021, our carbon emissions were 440 million tonnes a year. By 2023, the last available year in their data set, they're at 453 million tonnes a year. They've gone up by 13 million tonnes a year. So we could just pretty much strike all of what Senator Grogan said just before, because basically her whole contribution was based on apparently them reducing carbon emissions, which they haven't actually done according to their own data. And just to take the broader point, Senator Grogan is right that Australia's carbon emissions as a whole have reduced, not under this government, but they have reduced since the mid-2000s. In 2005, which is the date set under the Kyoto Agreement, our emissions were 611 million tonnes a year. They are, as I said, 453, so they've gone down roughly 160 million tonnes a year. Almost all of that reduction, almost all of it, has occurred through putting greater restrictions on our nation's farmers to be able to develop their own land. The so-called land use change category in the carbon accounts have reduced by 150 million tonnes a year. That's 150 of the 160 that we have reduced as a country. And that land use change is because largely state governments have put massive restrictions on farmers being able to clear their own property and clear their own land, and through the vagaries of the pretty dodgy carbon accounting schemes we have, we're allowed to say that that's a credit and that's reducing our emissions because we're not clearing as much land as we used to. Work that out if you can at home. But look, bringing myself to the actual bill itself, I do support Senator Grogan in saying this bill is not needed. It is misdirected. It is trying to change the wrong piece of legislation to tackle this goal. I may get time later to come to the broader issues of climate change policy, but just to take the objective of what Senator Hanson-Young is trying to achieve at its face value, her own aims will not be achieved by this bill, and can't be, because this bill would seek to change the temperature of the globe, stop algal blooms in South Australia, apparently, by assessing the carbon emission impact on a project-by-project basis. Because the way the EPBC works is that projects come forward for approval through our environmental law system, and the Greens are suggesting that somehow we would stop a project on an individual basis because of its, I presume, its individual impact on global temperatures and global carbon emissions. Senator Hanson-Young herself said, Chair, that she pointed to the North West Shelf project that has been approved, well, conditionally approved by this government. I welcome that. It's not through completely yet, but it would have Scope 1 and 2 emissions, carbon emissions, of around 8 million tonnes a year. Some say a little bit less, but let's take the higher amount, 8 million tonnes a year. So let's say we get this legislation passed and we stop the North West Shelf project. Well, if you take the IPCC formulas based on carbon emission impact, on the impact on temperatures, stopping the North West Shelf project would lower global temperatures by a sum total of 0.000121 of a degree Celsius. I don't know if that's going to stop the algal blooms in South Australia, but it seems unlikely that a 0.0001 degree Celsius change in the temperature is going to have a material impact on any of us. But yet that is what, I mean, that was the premise of the whole contribution of Senator Hanson-Young. She is promising her people, the Australian people, that if we stop this one project, then the weather will change in this country. That is completely and utterly absurd. And it treats the Australian people like morons. They're not. And Senator Hanson-Young was saying, we're all stupid. No, I'm with stupid. I'm with stupid in this chamber. It is completely stupid here to sit here and say that stopping one project is going to have a material impact on the world's climate or weather. But that's what this whole bill is trying to do. So it should be rejected on that basis alone. We know that this is inconsistent with the original objects of the bill, of the EPBC Act, which has been around for a long time. It does have its problems, but we know it's inconsistent with the original objectives because this matter was spoken about in the second reading speech of the EPBC Act that then Senator Robert Hill introduced, and he said in that second reading speech that ultimately, of course, we need to do more than just the best possible environmental law regime to protect Australia's environment and promote ecologically sustainable development. He went on to say reducing growth in greenhouse gas emissions is being achieved through a $180 million policy announced last year. Clearly, the intent of the government and the parliament that passed this Act was to say that, look, this Act is dealing with some elements of the need to protect our nation's environment, but it is not tackling issues. There were some others he mentioned, but is not precisely aimed at tackling greenhouse gas emissions. And it's not the vehicle to do that. It is just not set up to do this in a proper way. It would be completely absurd to stop projects like North West Shelf, given their minimal impact alone on the climate. Now, we are led to believe by the move of this bill, Chair, Senator Hanson-Young, that somehow Australia would be getting left behind if we didn't pass this bill, and somehow the rest of the world is taking significant action on climate change. Again, very little evidence or facts provided to back that statement up. It is simply asserted, but all of that data is available. Indeed, there has been some new data released in the last few weeks by the eminent Statistical Review of World Energy. It is the Bible on all of these matters, now conducted by the Energy Institute. It's the best data source of all the different energy sources that are used around the world, and it has a very good series on greenhouse gas emissions as well. That series shows, or that data showed, released a few weeks ago, that since the world signed up to this fantastical concept of net zero emissions, that occurred in late 2021 at the Glasgow Climate Conference. And so since 2021, the world signed up to net zero. Apparently, they all signed up to net zero. They said, and we're constantly told that the world is now reducing carbon emissions, we're getting to net zero, we're going to get there, rah, rah, rah. Well, we've got now 3 years of data since 2021, and since then, global carbon emissions are up 1.7 billion tonnes a year. Every year, the world is emitting 1.7 billion tonnes more. Now, this is a very inconvenient fact for those that stand in this chamber and say that the rest of the world is acting. But it shows how inconvenient it is and embarrassing it is that none of them ever deal with it. I mean, it would be worth, if you want your arguments to be taken seriously, actually tackle the fact that how can you stand there and say that the world is acting on climate change when actually they've gone up by almost 2 billion tonnes in just 3 years since this agreement was signed. And keep in mind how much that is. As I said earlier, Australia, now thanks to the Labor government, we're a bit higher than we were before they got elected, but we do now emit 450 million tonnes a year. And so the world's increased its emissions by more than 3 times what we produce in any one year just in the last 3 years. So can we drop the act that the rest of the world is acting? It's not. They're not acting. They're not changing. They're continuing to produce energy for people that often quite don't have access to the 24 hours of electricity that we are lucky to have. And all evidence points to the fact that countries are going to continue to do that. They're going to continue to prioritise the energy needs of their people, often poor people, much poorer than us, rather than deal or tackle with the luxury items that those of us in the West seem obsessed with. Now, it is true that some countries have reduced their emissions. They've largely lost their industry too, but it is, I think, instructive to focus a little bit on who is increasing their carbon emissions and why they might be doing that. We're constantly told that the coal industry is dying or no one will buy our coal anymore. I noticed Senator Grogan mentioned we've got great solar and wind resources. I agree with that, but we also have great coal resources in this country as well. The Labor Party doesn't mention that very often anymore. We have fantastic coal resources. We sell them to the world. And again, another inconvenient fact is that Energy Institute data showed that since net zero emissions was agreed to by the world is mining 1.2 billion tonnes more coal than it did beforehand. 1.2 billion tonnes. Again, putting that in context, we actually mine a similar amount of coal and carbon emissions, 450-odd million tonnes a year of coal from Australia and the increase has been more than double what we mine just in the last 3 years. Now, another way to put this in context that I like to do is that, because I think still most people remember this thing called the Adani Carmichael coal mine. It was a little bit controversial there a few years ago. It was a thing. It was the Northwest Shelf of a few years ago. If Sarah Hetzian was giving this speech 5 or 6 years ago, no doubt Adani would have gotten a very liberal mention in her contribution. They don't mention it anymore. It is actually up and running. The mine is going. The planet hasn't blown up yet, but it is employing 1,200 people there in North Queensland. It produces about 10 million tonnes a year. It's been a little bit more than that lately, but it's a nice round figure of 10 million tonnes a year. That's basically the Adani Carmichael mine. And so China, actually I'll start at the bottom. Mongolia has increased its coal mining by 74 million tonnes per annum since net zero came into effect. That's 7 Adanis. 7 Adanis it's opened up. Indonesia, they've increased their coal mining by 222 million tonnes a year. So they've opened 22 Adanis in 3 years. Did you hear about it? Did anyone read about that in the newspaper? It was front-page news in this country, opening up one Adani, one mine of 10 million tonnes a year. But when Indonesia opens up 22 of them, nary a mention. I might come back to that. I might come back to that stat if I've got time with the story in Indonesia. India have increased their coal mining by 273 million tonnes a year. So that's 27 Adanis. Good luck to them. They've got much lower electricity prices than we do. But let's wait for it, of course. We have to not forget our friend China. China has increased its coal mining by 654 million tonnes a year. So it's opened up 65 Adani Carmichael coal mines in just 3 years. China produces almost 6 billion tonnes of coal a year, right? But it's increased that by 654 just in the last 3 years. I have to give the Chinese government officials such respect that they can keep a straight face when they talk to us about green steel and reducing emissions. And meanwhile, I bet you the Prime Minister didn't mention the fact that they increased their coal mining by 654 million tonnes. If he really cared about climate change, would he mention that? Now, so little old Australia, we're signed up to net zero. We have actually reduced our emissions, but we have destroyed our energy grid trying to. Since we signed up to net zero, electricity prices are up 30% if it weren't for the enormous government subsidies that are ending soon. Gas is up 39% in price, and that is why everybody is struggling in this country. And meanwhile, we're losing our industry. As I mentioned, I might come back to that Indonesian figure. It's increased coal mining by this much, a massive amount. Why has it done that? Well, a big reason for its increase in coal mining, and it's increased its coal-fired power as well. We think there's about 20 new coal-fired power stations being built in Indonesia in the last 3 years. 20. It's more than we have in this country. They have fuelled a massive expansion in nickel smelting in Indonesia. It's a great documentary on Channel 7. Give that credit recently in it. But again, it gets very little commentary here when we talk about this thing that one of our closest neighbours to us, not only increasing their carbon emissions, they're doing so to massively expand their nickel smelting, and the effect of that has been to shut Australia's nickel refinery and nickel smelter. We've lost the nickel industry, but for a couple of nickel mines left. We've lost 10,000 jobs in this country because of that, and it never gets mentioned. Never gets mentioned. And we've lost it because other countries are laughing at us while we destroy our energy competitiveness, and they just go on with gay abandon, expanding coal mining, building coal-fired power stations and taking our jobs. And I do note that yesterday I was trying to listen intently to the Governor-General's address. It became a bit of a laundry list for the Labor Party, but I was trying to listen intently, and one thing I did note that there was not a single mention from the Governor-General yesterday that the Labor Party would lower electricity prices. Anyone else notice that? I went back and had a look. In 2022, the then Governor-General David Hurley did say that his government, the then Labor government, will help give families and businesses hundreds of dollars a year, give families and businesses hundreds of dollars a year off their electricity bills. That's what he said. Now, did that happen? I don't think it did. They didn't live up to that commitment. Electricity bills went up, and yesterday the Labor Party flew the white flag on the cost of living crisis that is still afflicting Australians, because now they're not even mentioning it. They'll mention this clean energy stuff. Who cares? OK, great, it's clean, but why am I paying $1,000 a year more for it? Why can't I have the same lower prices as other countries?